Welcome to Conversations with Dr. Steve. As many of you know, I began these conversations and podcasts several weeks ago. I hope that those of you listening are learning and getting some insight into the Word of God. It's very fulfilling for me to produce these podcasts. And if you are getting something out of them and enjoying the content, I would greatly appreciate if you were to hit the like button, because this helps give these podcasts traction in the algorithm. AI is happy if you hit the like button. So we're talking today about the church in Pergamos. This church was a place where there was quite a bit of idol worship, worshiping the various Roman gods that we spoke of last time when we talked about the Church of Smyrna. The Roman Empire involved significant idol worship. So the context of the early Christian church was one of being in a society, being in a world where there was significant idol worship and everything that goes along with idol worship, predominantly sexual immorality. So here, let's look at the Church of Pergamos and see what Jesus had to say. Chapter 2, verse 12, "And to the angel of the church of Pergamos write, These things says he who has a sharp two-edged sword." Now this is significant that Jesus would say this about having a sharp two-edged sword. The particular word used for this type of sword that Jesus is portraying himself as wielding is what is known as the rhamphia, which was the long sword that the Roman army used in combat. So this is no small or no insignificant characteristic of how Jesus wants to present himself to the church of Pergamos. Jesus is saying in no uncertain terms that he has come to fight. He has come to fight against the satanic forces that are involved in this city. So let's read further. Verse 13, "I know your works and where you dwell, where Satan's throne is. And you hold fast to my name and did not deny my faith, even in the days in which Antipas was my faithful martyr, who was killed among you where Satan dwells." Again, Jesus is saying specifically that Pergamos is a city where Satan dwells. And he mentions the throne. Pergamos had an idol erected to the Greek god Zeus, which was around 40 feet tall. And history tells us that when looking up to this idol, that it appeared that Zeus was sitting on a great throne. So Jesus says, where Satan's throne is. This is not idle talk. This is Jesus saying these things. This is Jesus pointing to the characteristics of the city of Pergamos that he had very strong feelings about, very strong disagreement with. So let's read on. Verse 14, "But I have a few things against you, because you have there those who hold the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the children of Israel, to eat things sacrificed to idols, and to commit sexual immorality. Thus, you also have those who hold the doctrine of the Nicolaitans, which I hate. Again, Jesus mentions the doctrine of the Nicolaitans and says again that he hates this doctrine. He also mentions that in Pergamos there were those who were worshiping idols and holding to the doctrine of Balaam and were committing sexual immorality. One thing to keep in mind when talking about these ancient idols, a large part of idol worship was sexual immorality. So you can see why Jesus would say he had such strong feelings and even hatred about these doctrines and idol worship. Such activity would bankrupt the individual spiritually and maybe even naturally. Such activity today bankrupts the Christian of their testimony and erodes their faith. And if they participate in such activity long enough, eventually it leads to the loss of their soul. These sorts of things are not new. These systems of idol worship existed long ago, during the time of the formulation of the early church. So Christians today should take note that what is transpiring on the earth today is something that was in existence many, many centuries ago. If anything, one could say that the world is seeing a resurgence of idol worship, a resurgence of demonic activity, especially here in the West. Having traveled to Africa on mission trips on 6 different occasions, I can tell you from experience there is a very significant difference between the way societies in other parts of the world interpret demonic activity, interpret the spiritual realm. We in the West really are somewhat underdeveloped in our understanding of the spiritual realm. One of the huge problems is that the spiritual realm and the reality of it simply is not taught in churches. In fact, I might say recognition of the demonic realm is looked upon as being something archaic, old-fashioned, and even uneducated. You have Christians who present themselves as saying, well, I believe in God, I believe in Jesus, but when it comes to the spiritual realm and demons and that sort of thing, I don't want anything to do with it. The Word of God tells us the very reason Jesus came as a man, the very reason God manifested himself as a man called Jesus, was to defeat the works of the devil. So how can one say logically, well, I believe in Jesus, but I don't want to believe or have anything to do with the demonic realm? When The very reason Jesus came was to defeat the demonic realm. Food for thought. In closing today's podcast, I want to say the church and Christianity has always survived attacks from without. In other words, Christianity and one's personal testimony and one's faith has always survived attacks from external forces. The real danger is when the attack comes from within, when Satan attacks the gospel message. The real danger for the church and for the Christian is false teaching and false doctrine. And that's what we see Jesus pointing to here when he's addressing the Church of Pergamos, is false doctrine, idol worship, sexual immorality. These are enemies coming from within. The enticing of one's soul to be drawn away to pursue the lusts of the flesh and the things involved in idol worship, and to entertain false doctrine that says all this sinful activity is okay when it's not okay.